Hello and welcome to the Farming Today podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. In this episode, underpowered and fragmented, MPs criticise the government's approach to flooding.
There's loads of evidence that if we don't support communities that are flooding, it costs us more in the end. We're going to spend the money one way or another. Our recommendation is that prevention is better than cure and get the funding spent up front.
Let's start, though, today with our focus for the week, council farms. They were originally set up in the 19th century to provide a way into farming for young farmers or for people who didn't come from a farming background. Traditionally, they were smaller and often seen as a starter farm from which a family could go on to a larger commercial tenancy. But over the past few decades, many councils have been reassessing their property portfolios and council farms have been sold off. This week we'll look at why and why some feel that is a mistake. Graham Willis, the farming lead at the countryside charity CPRE, did a research project on council farms a few years ago and he told me they are still important.
They're really special. They're a national strategic asset. They offer the first rung on the ladder for new entrants into farming, and obviously there are other landlords who can do that. But council farms offer disproportionately, acre for acre, far more opportunities. So they just represent around 3% of the tenanted land, but over 50% of the equipped farms. So that's farms with homes and buildings that can let a new person into farming get a really good start into farming. And also they offer longer farm business tenancies as well than the average landlord by about a couple of years. So give people a better chance to get established and start a new business or develop the one they've got.
And yet, many councils have looked at all the properties they've got and decided to sell off farms. Firstly, to plug some funding gaps.
Yeah, indeed. That's the real worry. I mean, we know that councils are facing real budgetary crises. There's a kind of short-termism about that. I mean, land of all the assets you could hold is about the best, a really good return over the long period. So that's a great asset to hang on to. I think the other thing is that those assets have been there for, as you say, over 100 years, but we could just lose them with one administration. And that seems very unfair. That can be lost so easily and will be almost impossible to regain. We want councils to look beyond them as a pure financial asset to be managed well, which they need to, but actually think of them how they can join up other policies. They have policies on restoring nature, dealing with climate change, education access, local food, and all those could be woven together with using their council farm estates in a much more joined up, holistic way, and that could have all kinds of benefits.
We are looking at the reorganisation of many councils across the country. What impact's that likely to have?
I think one of the hardest things is we don't quite know. The new combined mayoral authorities may well have some interesting powers, but we don't really know how that's going to sort of align with reorganisation of local authorities into unitary councils. And my big fear for council farm estates is you could have large estates being merged, and then I don't know what happens to the council farm estate plans. Is food or farming a priority for those new big authorities? We don't know. I would argue that farming is the start of everything, and it should be part of their strategic thinking. But as we so often know, farming is way behind in the sort of strategic thinking of government and local government. So there is a worry that farming could sort of fall out of the equation, and those estates actually are even under more threat than they are currently.
Does it really matter? Because many of these farms, even if they're sold off by the council, will remain farms or farmland.
I think it goes back to that issue about how young people get into farming. It was the Future of Farming report in 2013 said if we didn't change something about council farms, there wouldn't be any opportunities for people who didn't already have a lot of capital behind them. So that does keep other people out of farming, could be amazing farmers. And we do need amazing farmers to face up to the current challenges the sector faces.
Graham Willis there. We've been talking to all the major political parties over the past few weeks during party conference season. Well, the SNP Conference continues in Aberdeen today, and with elections to the Scottish Parliament in May, there is a lot to discuss. The SNP currently runs the Scottish Government, and as agricultural policy is devolved, that means they've been developing the post-Brexit system of farm support there. I spoke to the SNP's Jim Fairley, he's the Minister for Agriculture and Connectivity, about the party's priorities for rural Scotland.
Our priorities are absolutely to make sure that we retain rural communities, make sure that our farmers have got the tools that they need to continue to produce food. They have got the tools that they need to help us in our biodiversity quest to make sure that we improve our biodiversity and we sequester carbon. We want to make sure that the communities are resilient. We want to make sure that people have viable livings and they stay in the rural communities where they currently are.
It has taken a while to develop, but your new post-Brexit funding for farming is now being phased in. It is a tricky time economically for many groups, farming included, and also, of course, we've had the added complication of the weather. How confident are you that this is the best way to help the sector?
Well, clearly you'll know that Scotland did not vote to come out of the EU. We voted very much to stay in. And one of the big things from somebody who's come from a farming background, I was 30 years in agriculture before I ever came into Parliament. One of the big things that we had with the EU was that 7-year certainty of ring-fence funding. Since then, we've been taken out of the EU against our will. The funding that we currently get via the Westminster grant is baselined. It hasn't increased any since, I think it's 2016. And we're trying to put in a policy just now which recognises that our farmers are food producers, but they also have a massive role in helping us to achieve our climate and biodiversity targets.
Brexit has happened. The funding from Westminster is unlikely to change in the near future. How do you see the future? What's your sell to farmers at this election?
Well, I think our sell to the farming community at this moment in time is the fact that, look, we've worked with you. We've helped to make sure you've got that stability. We've kept direct payments and we have given you a clear steer on the direction of travel. Yes, I get that there's frustration that things didn't get done quickly, but we've come out of a 50-year policy development system within the EU, and we're trying to develop a policy, and that's never going to be easy to get that right immediately.
Although some environmentalists say this is a massive missed opportunity on your part to try and improve things.
Well, I don't believe that that's the case, because we've brought in some real constructive measures. We've put in the whole farm plans. We're doing soil testing. We're putting in the biodiversity plans. We're putting the animal welfare plans. All these things are coming into play. But we also have to ensure that we've got food resilience as very much part of our production. Agriculture is one of our biggest emitters. We know that that's the case. So we're asking our farmers to do an awful lot more for the funding that they get. And I think because we've worked in the way that we have, I think we've got a relationship now where we'll get our farmers to come with us to make sure that they're on that journey to allow us to do all the things that we need to do in the policies that we've developed.
Jim Fairley from the SNP. England's current approach to planning for floods is underpowered and fragmented. That's according to a report from MPs, which is published today. It says that around 2/3 of England is now considered floodable under certain conditions, and that the cost of floods is expected to rise to £3.6 billion annually by 2050. The Environmental Audit Committee says the government should set up a single joint flood reporting and information service and spend more on flood resilience, with a fairer funding formula for rural areas. The MPs say farmers can play a key role here, for instance, in storing water, but should be paid for that work. Well, Toby Perkins, the Labour MP for Chesterfield, chairs the committee. He told me rural areas were very much part of their thinking.
I think rural communities often suffer, because of sometimes the sparsity of the populations. They've been near the back of the queue when it's come to actually attracting funding from governments. And also the farming community plays a huge contribution in protecting more urban areas from flooding, often very much to the detriment of the farming business. So I think that the impact on rural areas was a key issue for us.
You particularly talk about farmers who provide storage, in effect, for floodwater, which obviously damages crops and the land itself. What would you like to see happen to that system?
My sense is that farmers often recognise this role that they play and are happy to work with government. But clearly, if they're losing crops, if they're finding that it's impossible for them to maintain their operations because of this flooding, then they need to know that there's consistency in the flood compensation they can receive. And that isn't something that they've seen so far.
The report also talks about farmers providing nature-based solutions to flooding, things like planting trees to slow the flow, re-wiggling rivers, that sort of thing. Do we need more of that and a different funding model for it?
We absolutely do. I mean, in fairness, the government have themselves said that their new funding model will focus more on nature-based solutions. We want them to hurry up and get on with that, and we've recommended they should be fully embedded in national flood policy by 2027. If you don't go for slow the flow, nature-based solutions, what you often find is that you protect one community at the expense of another community just down the way. Slow the flow type of solutions where you see water dispersed and then put into the water courses over a longer periods are both more environmentally friendly and more effective at protecting those communities.
You do talk about more money in this report at a time, obviously, when there isn't really more money around.
Well, there's loads of evidence that if we don't support communities that are flooding, it costs us more in the end. And we also know that local authorities, the Environment Agency, are spending millions and billions of pounds in dealing with the after effects of flooding. So, we're going to spend the money one way or another. Our recommendation is that prevention is better than cure and get the funding spent up front.
How optimistic are you that the government will be listening?
Well, I think we have seen some encouraging signs. I think it's our job as the committee to keep pushing the government to carry on being more ambitious. We also need communities and general public to understand that flooding is going to be an ever more current part of our annual life, and those communities that have been hit by floods are going to have to learn as best they can to be able to deal with that, whilst also being demanding of government to do everything that they can.
The chair of the Environmental Audit Committee, Toby Perkins. And that's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Beatrice Fenton, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.